entities according to their association.
Gurma Dhanam Chitra will bring her at 6:15.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since these varieties are visible in this life, we may assume that the living entities, according to their association with different modes of material nature, will be happy, distressed, or between the two in their next lives also. Therefore, the best policy is to disassociate oneself from the three modes of material nature and be always transcendental to their contamination. This is possible only when one fully engages in the devotional service of the Lord. As Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Vamschayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatittan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages
ये जो कमरा है ना, ये पर्दा वगैरह लगा दो, एक प्रॉपर किसी से आने वाले या कोई आने वाले मुझे मिल रहे।
ठीक है, मैं लगाता हूँ टाइम।
One,
माता जी है तो वो बड़े तो है बात करते हैं।
हाँ, सब होता है।
one who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the spiritual platform. Unless one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, one is subject to the contamination of the three modes of material nature and must therefore suffer from distress or mixed happiness and distress. Text 47. Just as springtime in the present indicates the nature of springtime in the past and future, so this life of happiness, distress, or a mixture of both gives evidence concerning the religious and irreligious activities of one's past and future lives. First, our past and future are not very difficult to understand, for time is under the contamination of the three modes of material nature. As soon as spring arrives, the usual exhibition of various types of fruits and flowers automatically becomes manifest, and therefore we may conclude that spring in the past was adorned with similar fruits and flowers and will be so adorned in the future also. Our repetition of birth and death is taking place within time, and according to the influence of the three modes of nature, we are receiving various types of bodies and being subjected to various conditions. Text 48. The omnipotent Yamraj is as good as Lord Brahma, for while situated in his own abode or in everyone's heart, like the Paramatma, he mentally observes the past activities of a living entity and thus understands how the living entity will act in future lives. Purport. One should not consider Yamraj an ordinary living being. He is as good as Lord Brahma. He has the complete cooperation of the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart, and therefore, by the grace of the Super Soul, he can see the past, present, and future of a living being from within. The word Anumimam Shatehe means that he can decide in consultation with the Super Soul. Anu means following. The actual decisions concerning the next life of the living entities are made by the Super Soul, and they are carried out by Yamraj. Text 49. As a sleeping person acts according to the body manifested in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with his present body, which he acquired because of his past religious or irreligious actions, and is unable to know his past or future lives. Purport. A man engages in sinful activities because he does not know what he did in his past life to get his present materially conditioned body, which is subjected to the threefold miseries, as stated by Rishabdev in Srimad Bhagavatam, Nunam Pramattah Kurute Vikarma. A human being who is mad after sense gratification does not hesitate to act sinfully. Yad indriya pritya apranoti. He performs sinful actions simply for sense gratification. Na sadhu manye. This is not good. Yato atmanoyam asan apikleshadha asah deha. Because of such sinful actions, one receives another body in which to suffer as he is suffering in his present body because of his past sinful activities. Text 50. Above the five senses of perception, the five working senses, and the five objects of senses is the mind, which is the 16th element. Above the mind is the 17th element, the soul, the living being himself, who, in cooperation with the other 16, enjoys the material world alone. The living being enjoys three kinds of situations, namely happy, distressful, and mixed. Purport. Everyone engages in work with his hands, legs, and other senses just to achieve a certain goal according to his concocted ideas. One tries to enjoy the five senses, namely form, sound, taste, aroma, and touch, not knowing the actual goal of life, which is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Because of disobeying the Supreme Lord, one is put into material conditions, and he then tries to improve his situation in a concocted way, not desiring to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nevertheless, the Supreme Lord is so kind that he comes himself to instruct the bewildered living entity how to act obediently and then gradually return home back to Godhead, where he can attain an eternal peaceful life of bliss and knowledge. The living entity has a body which is a very complicated combination of the material elements, and with this body he struggles alone, as indicated in this verse by the word ekastuh. For example, if one is struggling in the ocean, he must swim through it alone. Although many other men and aquatics are swimming in the ocean, he must take care of himself because no one else will help him. Therefore, this verse indicates that the 17th item, the soul, must work alone. Although he tries to create society, friendship, and love, no one will be able to help him but Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his only concern should be how to satisfy Krishna. That is also what Krishna wants. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam shanam. People bewildered by material conditions try to be united. But although they strive for unity among men and nations, all their attempts are futile. Everyone must struggle alone for existence with the many elements of nature. Therefore, one's only hope, as Krishna advises, is to surrender to him, for he can help one become free from the ocean of nescience. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore prayed, Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavam buddham kripaya tava pada pankaj sthita dhuli sadrisham vichintaya. O Krishna, beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, but somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of nescience. And although I am struggling very hard, there is no way I can save myself. If you kindly pick me up and fix me as one of the particles of dust at your lotus feet, that will save me. In a similar way, Bhakti Vinod Thakur sang, Anadi karama phale, padi bhavanara jale, tari bare na dekhiyo. My dear Lord, I cannot remember when I somehow or other fell into this ocean of nescience, and now I can find no way to rescue myself. We should remember that everyone is responsible for his own life. If an individual becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, he is then delivered from the ocean of nescience. Text 51. The subtle body is endowed with 16 parts: the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, the 5 objects of senses, and the mind. This subtle body is an effect of the 3 modes of material nature. It is composed of insurmountably strong desires, and therefore It causes the living entity to transmigrate from one body to another in human life, animal life, and life as a demigod. When the living entity gets the body of a demigod, he is certainly very jubilant. When he gets a human body, he is always in lamentation. And when he gets the body of an animal, he is always afraid. In all conditions, however, he is actually miserable. His miserable condition is called samshriti or transmigration in material life. Purport. The sum and substance of material conditional life is explained in this verse. The living entity, the 17th element, is struggling alone, life after life. This struggle is called samshriti or material conditional life. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the force of material nature is surmountably strong. Devi Esha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratya. Material nature harasses the living entity in different bodies. But if the living entity surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes free from this entanglement, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mam eva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. Thus, his life becomes successful. 52. The foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influence of the modes of material nature against his desires. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in a network of his own fruitive activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus, he is always bewildered and repeatedly he dies. Purport. As already explained, the influence of the modes of nature is very strong. The living entity, entangled in different types of fruitive activity, is like a silkworm trapped in a cocoon. Getting free is very difficult unless he is helped by the Supreme Personality of God. Text 53. Not a single living entity can remain unengaged even for a moment. One must act by his natural tendency according to the three modes of material nature, because this natural tendency forcibly makes him work in a particular way. But the swabhavika or one's natural tendency is the most important factor in action. One's natural tendency is to serve because a living entity is an eternal servant of God. The living entity wants to serve, but because of his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, he serves under the modes of material nature and manufactures various modes of service, such as socialism, humanitarianism, and altruism. However, one should be enlightened in the tenets of Bhagavad Gita and accept the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one give up all natural tendencies for material service under different names and take to the service of the Lord. One's original natural tendency is to act in Krishna consciousness because one's real nature is spiritual. The duty of a human being is to understand that since he is essentially spirit, he must abide by the spiritual tendency and not be carried away by material tendencies. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur has therefore sung Maya Ravase Yaksha Vese Kacha Hubadugo Hai. My dear brothers, you are being carried away by the waves of material nature and are suffering in many miserable conditions. Sometimes you are drowning in the waves of material nature, and sometimes you are tossed like a swimmer struggling in the ocean. As confirmed by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, this tendency to be battered by the waves of Maya can be changed to one's original natural tendency, which is spiritual. When the living entity comes to understand that he is eternally Krishna Das, a servant of God. Jiva Krishna Das ei Vishwas Karlita Ara Dukha Na. If instead If instead of serving Maya under different names, one turns his service attitude towards the Supreme Lord, he is then saved. And there is no more difficulty. If one turns to his original natural tendency in the human form of life by understanding the perfect knowledge given by Krishna himself in the Vedic literature, one's life is successful. 54. The fruitive activities of a living being performs, whether pious or impious, are the unseen causes of the fulfillment of his desires. This unseen cause is the root for the living entity's different bodies. Because of his intense desire, the living entity takes birth in a particular family and receives a body which is either like that of his mother or like that of his father. The gross and subtle bodies are created according to his desires. Purport. The gross body is a product of the subtle body, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.6. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam yajanti yanta kalevaram tam tam eveti konteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. The atmosphere of the subtle bodies at the time of death is created by the activities of the gross body. Thus, the gross body acts during one's lifetime and the subtle body acts at the time of death. The subtle body, which is called linga, the body of desires, is the background for the development of a particular type of gross body, which is either like that of one's mother or like that of one's father. According to the Riga Veda, if at the time of sex the secretion of the mother are more profuse than those of the father, the child will receive a female body. And if the secretions of the father are more profuse than those of the mother, the child will receive a male body. These are the subtle laws of nature, which acts according to the desire of the living entity. If a human being is taught to change his subtle body by developing a consciousness of Krishna at the time of death, the subtle body will create a gross body in which he will be a devotee of Krishna. Or if he is still more perfect, he will not take another material body but will immediately get a spiritual body and thus return back to God. Yes,
You know the devotee Anand Chaitanya?
I will ask him.
He's tall, his wife is also tall.
He's from our congregation?
He comes today.
Yeah, I saw him with Rishi Kumar.
Yeah,
महाराज बुला रहे कहाँ है
no.
कहाँ पर है
He tells Anand Chaitanya,
वाक पे आके महाराज बुला रहे हैं इधर
just give me a minute.
Okay.
मैं वहाँ पे बंदोबस्त कर लिया.
नहीं नहीं
मेरी मानो ना चलिए मैंने चैतन्य को बुलाना था पूजा कर
वॉक पे
चलेगा
ये तो कोई आने वाला नहीं आना चाहिए था तो ये रहेगा फिर
Lakshmi is leaving as his girl.
Gurudev, she's going to Vrindavan today and then coming back on Saturday. Gurudev, she's going by taxi. She's been at our house for a few days now. So the taxi is coming from Vrindavan and then
6:15.
Yes, Gurudev.
Even at 6,
Yes, Gurudev, whatever suits you, any time is fine.
that time I'll finish my puja.
Surely, Gurudev.
You can just tell her, you can bring it down at 6:30.
Yes, Gurudev. Yes, thank you.
She is going to Vrindavan and she will be there for a few days.
Yes, Gurudev. She gave a program at her house on Saturday, and then she'll be back on this coming Saturday also. She'll give another program on Saturday.
You can arrange as many programs as they want.
Yes,
I have
Gurudev.
no objection.
Yes, Gurudev.
Yeah. Okay, then if you don't mind, 6:15, just come at 6:30.
No problem at all, Gurudev.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Thank you.
Text 55. Since the living entity is associated with material nature, he is in an awkward position. But in human form of life, he is taught how to associate with the
बुलाना था बुला ले वो पे जाना था उस पे जाओ फिर दवाई छोड़ दो दवाई लगा दिया टेबल पर है
हाँ ठीक है
बाद में
निकाल के रख दूँ ऐसे रहने बॉक्स में
लगा के रख दो सारे टेबल लगा
ठीक है
Since the living entity is associated with material nature, he is in an awkward position. But if in the human form of life, he is taught how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotees, this position can be overcome. Purport. The word Prakriti means material nature, and Purusha may also refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one wants to continue his association with Prakriti, the female energy of Krishna, and be separated from Krishna by the illusion that he is able to enjoy Prakriti, he must continue in this conditional life. If he changes his consciousness and associate with the Supreme Original Person, Purusam Saswatam, or with his associates, he can get out of the entanglement of material nature, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvata. One must simply understand that the Supreme Person Krishna, in terms of his form, name, activities and pastimes, this will keep one away in the association. This will keep one always in the association of Krishna. Tyaktva deham punarjanmane mam iti so Arjuna. Thus, after giving up his gross material body, one accepts not another gross body, but a spiritual body, in which to return home back to God. Thus one ends the tribulation caused by his association with the material energy. In summary, the living entity is an eternal servant of God, but he comes to the material world and is bound by material conditions because of his desire to lord it over matter. Liberation means giving up this false consciousness and reviving one's original service to the Lord. This return to one's original life is called mukti, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Muktir hitvanyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthitah. Text 56 and 57. In the beginning, this Brahmana named Ajamil studied all the Vedic literatures. He was a reservoir of good character, good conduct, and good qualities, firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions. He was very mild and gentle, and he kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful. He knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was also very pure. Ajamil was very respectful to his spiritual master, the fire god. Guess and the elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. Purport. The order carriers of Yamraj, the Yamdutas, are explaining the factual position of piety or impiety and how a living entity is entangled in this material world. Describing the history of Ajamila's life, the Yamadutas relate that in the beginning he was a learned scholar of the Vedic literature. He was well behaved, neat and clean, and very kind to everyone. In fact, he had all good qualities. In other words, he was like a perfect Brahmana. A Brahmana is expected to be perfectly pious, to follow all the regulative principles, and to have all good qualities. The symptoms of piety are explained in these verses. Srila Veera Raghavacharya comments that Dhir Vrata means Dhritam Vratan Sangaha Rahityatmakaha Brahmacharya Rupam. In other words, Ajamila followed the rules and regulations of celibacy as a perfect brahmachari and was very soft-hearted, truthful, plain, and pure. How he fell down in spite of all these qualities and thus came to be threatened with punishment by Yamaraj will be described in the following verses. Text 58 to 16. Once this Brahmana Ajamil, following the orders of his father, went to the forest to collect fruit, flowers, and two kinds of grass called Samit and Kusha. On the way home, he came upon a Shudra, a very lusty, fourth-class man, who was shamelessly embracing and kissing a prostitute. The Shudra was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both the Shudra and the prostitute were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress had become loose. Such was the condition in which Ajamil saw them. While traveling alone the public way, Ajamil came upon a fourth-class man and a prostitute, who are vividly described here. Drunkenness was sometimes manifest even in bygone ages, although not very frequently. In this age of Kali, however, such sin is to be seen everywhere. For people all over the world have become shameless. Long ago, when he saw the scene of a drunken Shudra and the prostitute, Ajamil, who was a perfect brahmachari, was affected. Nowadays, such sin is visible in so many places. And we must consider the position of a brahmachari student who sees such behavior. For such a brahmachari to remain steady is very difficult unless he is extremely strong in following the regulative principles. Nevertheless, if one takes to Krishna consciousness very seriously, he can withstand the provocation created by sin. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we prohibit illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. In Kali Yuga, a drunk, half-naked woman embracing a drunk man is very common sight, especially in the Western countries, and restraining oneself after seeing such thing is very difficult. Nevertheless, if by the grace of Krishna, one adheres to the regulative principles and chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Krishna will certainly protect him. Indeed, Krishna says that his devotee is never vanquished. Kaunteya pratijanahi name bhaktya pranashati. Therefore, all the disciples practicing Krishna consciousness should obediently follow the regulative principles and remain fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Then there need be no fear. Otherwise, one's position is very dangerous, especially in this Kali Yuga. Text 61. The Shudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing the prostitute. When Ajamil saw her, the dormant lusty desire in his heart awakened, and in illusion he fell under their control. Purport. It is said that if one's body is smeared with turmeric, it attracts the lusty desire of the opposite sex. The word Kamaliktena indicates that the Shudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body. Text 62. As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires. But because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Purport. Unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified Brahmana, as described above, could not control his lusty desires. It's coming. Could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service. Text 63. In the same way that the sun and the moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahmana lost all his good sides. Taking advantage of this situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time, he took her as a servant in his house and abandoned all the regulated principles of a Brahmana. Purport. By speaking this verse, Sukadeva Goswami wants to impress upon the mind of the readers that Ajamila's exalted position of a Brahmana was vanquished by his association with the prostitute, so much so that he forgot all his Brahmanical activities. Nevertheless, at the end of his life, by chanting the 4 syllables of the name Narayan, he was saved from the gravest danger of falling down. Swalpam api asya dharmasya kayate mahato bhaya. Even a little devotional service can save one from the greatest danger. Devotional service, which begins with chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is so powerful that even if one falls down from the exalted position of a Brahmana through sexual indulgence, he can be saved from all calamities if he somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord. This is the extraordinary power of the Lord's holy name. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita it is advised that one not forget the chanting of the holy name even for a moment. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatatanscha dridah vrata. There are so many dangers in this material world that one may fall down from an exalted position at any time. Yet, if one keeps himself always pure and steady by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he will be safe without a doubt. 64. Thus Ajamil began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahmanical activities to satisfy the prostitute. Purport. There are many instances throughout the world in which even a purified person, being attracted by a prostitute, spends all the money he has inherited. Prostitute hunting is so abominable that the desire for sex with a prostitute can ruin one's character, destroy one's exalted position, and plunder all one's money. Therefore, illicit sex is strictly prohibited. One should be satisfied with his married wife, for even slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna conscious Grasta should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife and be peaceful simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Otherwise, at any moment, he may fall down from his good position, as exemplified in this case of Ajamila. Text 65. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glances of the prostitute, the victimized Brahmana Ajamil engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife, who came from a very respectable Brahmana family. Purport. Customarily, everyone is eligible to inherit his father's property, and Ajamil also inherited the money of his father. But what did he do with that money? Instead of engaging the money in the service of Krishna, he engaged in the service of a prostitute. Therefore, he was condemned and was punishable by Yamraj. How did this happen? He was victimized by the dangerous, lustful glances of a prostitute. Text 66. Although born of a Brahmana family, this rascal, bereft of intelligence because of the prostitute's association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitute's sons and daughters. Text 67. This Brahmana irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the holy scriptures, living extravagantly and eating food prepared by a prostitute. Therefore, he is full of sins, he is unclean and is addicted to forbidden activities. Purport. Food prepared by an unclean, sinful man or woman, especially a prostitute, is extremely infectious. Ajamil ate such food, and therefore he was subject to be punished by Yamraj. Text 68. This man Ajamil did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. Purport. The Vishnu Dutas had forbidden the Yamadutas to take Ajamil to Yamraj, and therefore the Yamadutas explained that taking such a man to Yamraj was appropriate. Since Ajamil had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts, he was to be taken to Yamraj to be purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful, and therefore he also must be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamraj is a process of purification for the most abominable sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamadutas requested the Vishnudutas not to obstruct their taking Ajamil to Yamraj. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 6th canto, 1st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The History of the Life of Ajamil. Chapter 2. Ajamil delivered by the Vishnudutas. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami said, My dear king, the servant of Lord Vishnu are always very expert in logic and arguments. After hearing the statements of the Yamadutas, they replied as follows. Text 2. The Vishnudutas said, Alas, how painful it is that irreligion is being introduced into an assembly where religion should be maintained. Indeed, those in charge of maintaining the religious principles are needlessly punishing a sinless, unpunishable person. Purport. The Vishnudutas accused the Yamadutas of violating the religious principles by attempting to drag Ajamil to Yamaraj for punishment. Yamaraj is the officer appointed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to judge religious and irreligious principles and to punish people who are irreligious. However, if completely sinful people are punished, if completely sinless people are punished, the entire assembly of Yamraj is contaminated. This principle applies not only in the assembly of Yamraj, but throughout human society also. Text 3. A king or governmental official should be so well qualified that he acts as a father, maintainer and protector of the citizens because of affection and love. He should give the citizens good advice and instructions according to the standard scriptures and should be equal to everyone. Yamraj does this, for he is the supreme master of justice, and so do those who follow in his footsteps. However, if such persons become polluted and exhibit partiality by punishing an innocent, blameless person, where will the citizens go to take shelter for their maintenance and security? Purpose. The king, or in modern times the government, should act as the guardian of the citizens by teaching them the proper goal of life. The human form of life is specially meant for realization of oneself and one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because this cannot be realized in animal life. The duty of the government, therefore, is to take charge of training all the citizens in such a way that by a gradual process they will be elevated to the spiritual platform and will realize that the self and his relationship with God. This principle was followed by kings like Maharaj Yudhishthir, Maharaj Parikshit, Lord Ramachandra, Maharaj Ambarisha, and Prahlad Maharaj. The leaders of the government must be very honest and religious, because otherwise all the affairs of the state will suffer. Text 4. The mass of people follow the example of a leader in society and imitate his behavior. They accept as evidence whatever the leader accepts. Although Ajamil was not punishable, the Yamadutas were insisting on taking him away to Yamaraj for punishment. This was dharma, contrary to religious. This was adharma, contrary to religious principles. The Vishnu Dutas feared that if such irreligious acts were allowed, the management of human society would be spoiled. In modern times, the Krishna consciousness movement is trying to introduce the right principle of management for human society. But unfortunately, the governments of Kali Yuga do not properly support the Hare Krishna movement, because they do not appreciate its valuable service. The Hare Krishna movement is the right movement for ameliorating the fallen conditions of human society, and therefore governments and public leaders in every part of the world should support this movement to completely rectify humanity's sinful condition. Text 5 and 6. People in general are not very advanced in knowledge by which to discriminate between religion and irreligion. The innocent, unenlightened citizens is like an arrogant animal, ignorant animal, sleeping in peace with its head on the lap of its master, faithfully believing in the master's protection. If a leader is actually kind-hearted and deserves to be the object of a living entity's faith, how can he punishes or kill a foolish person who has fully surrendered in good faith and friendship? Purport. The Sanskrit word Vishwasghar refers to one who breaks faith or causes a breach of trust. The mass of people should always feel security because of the government's protection. Therefore, how regrettable it is for the government itself to cause a breach of trust and put the citizens in difficulty for political reasons. We actually saw during the partition days in India that although Hindus and Muslims were living together peacefully, manipulation by politicians suddenly aroused feeling of hatred between them. And thus the Hindus and Muslims killed one another over politics. This is a sign of Kali Yuga. In this age, animals are kept nicely sheltered, completely confident that their masters will protect them. But unfortunately, as soon as the animal are fat, they are immediately sent for slaughter. Such cruelty is condemned by Vaishnavas like the Vishnu Dutas. Indeed, the hellish condition already described await the sinful man responsible for such suffering. One who betrays the confidence of a living entity who takes shelter of him in good faith, whether that living entity be a human being or an animal, is extremely sinful. Because such betrayals now go unpunished by the government, all of human society is terribly contaminated. Text 7. Ajamil has already atoned for all his sinful actions. Indeed, he has atoned not only for the sins performed in one's life, but for those performed in millions of lives. For in a helpless condition, he chanted the holy name of Narayan. Even though he did not chant purely, he chanted without offense, and therefore he is now pure and eligible for liberation. Purport. The Yamadutas had considered not the external situation of Ajamil. Since he was extremely sinful throughout his life, they thought he should be taken to Yamaraj and did not know that he had become free from the reactions of all his sins. The Vishnudutas therefore instructed that because he had chanted the 4 syllables of the name Narayan, At the time of his death, he was freed from all sinful reactions. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes the following verses from the Smriti Shastras. Namno hi yavati sakti papa nirharane hare tavat kartum na saknodi patakam patikihi nara. Simply by chanting the holy name of Hari, a sinful man can counteract the reactions to more sins than he is able to commit. Brihad Vishnu Puran. अवश्नेनापि यन्नाम नामी मुच्यते सर्वपातकः पुमान् विमुच्यते साध्यः सिंहस्तस्थैः मृगैः इव. If one chant the holy name of the Lord, even in a helpless condition or without desiring to do so, all the reactions of his sinful life departs. Just as when a lion roars, all the small animals flee in fear. That is Garuda. Sakshra Uccaritam Yenha Haris iti Akshara Doyam Badda Parikaraktena Mokshashaha Gomanam Prati. By once chanting the holy name of the Lord, which consists of the two syllables Hari, one guarantees his path to liberation. Skandapura. There are some of the reasons why the Vishnu Dutas objected to the Yamadutas taking Ajamil to the court of Navra. Text 8. The Vishnu Dutas continued. Even previously, while eating at the other times, this Ajamil would call his son saying, "My dear Narayan, please come here." Although calling the name of his son, he nevertheless uttered the 4 syllables Na, Ra, Ya, Na. Simply by chanting the name of Narayan in this way, he sufficiently atoned for the sinful reactions of millions of lives. Purport. Previously, when engaged in sinful activities to maintain his family, Ajamil chanted the name of Narayan without offenses. To chant the name of Lord just to counteract one's sinful activities or to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name is offense. Namno baladyasyahi papa buddhi. But although Ajamil engaged in sinful activities, he never chanted the name of Lord Narayan to counteract them. He simply chanted the name Narayan to call his son. Therefore, his chanting was effective. Because of chanting the holy name of Narayan in this way, he had already vanquished the accumulated sinful reactions of many lives. In the beginning, he was pure, but although he later committed many sinful acts, he was offenseless because he did not chant the holy name of Narayan to counteract it. One who always chants the holy name of the Lord without offense is always pure. As confirmed in this verse, Ajamil was already sinless, and because he chanted the name of Narayan, he remained sinless. It does not matter that he was calling his son. The name itself was effective. Text 9 and 10. The chanting of the holy name of Lord Vishnu is the best process of atonement for a thief of gold or other valuables, for a drunkard, for one who betrays a friend or relative, for one who kills a brahmana, or for one who indulges in sex with the wife of his guru or another superior. It is also the best method of atonement for one who murders women, the king or his father, for one who slaughters cows, and for all other sinful men. Simply by chanting the holy name of Lord Vishnu, such sinful persons may attract the attention of the Supreme Lord, who therefore considers, because this man has chanted my holy name, my duty is to give him protection. Text 11. By following the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies or undergoing atonement, sinful men do not become as purified as by chanting once the holy name of Lord Hari. Although ritualistic atonement may free one from sinful reactions, it does not awaken devotional service. Unlike the chanting of the Lord's name, which reminds one of the Lord's fame, qualities, attributes, pastimes, and paraphernalia. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that the chanting of the holy name of the Lord has a special significance that distinguishes it from the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies of atonement for severe, more severe or most serious sinful actions. There are 20 types of religious scriptures called Dharma Shastras, beginning with the Manu Samhita and Parashara Samhita. But herein it is stressed that although one may become free from the reactions of most sinful activities by following the religious principles of these scriptures, this cannot promote a sinful man to the stage of loving service to the Lord. On the other hand, chanting the holy name of the Lord even once not only free one immediately from the reactions of the greatest sins, but also raises one to the platform of rendering devotional, loving service to the Supreme Personality of God, who is described as Uttama Shloka because he is famous for his serious activity. Yes. I will keep that.
दिसंबर को फोन कर दिया
पीछे तो
आ रहे हैं